On the streets of Washington, D.C., a bomb blast kills a former ambassador and his young assistant. As the FBI investigation closes in on the bombers, the killers set their sights on the agents and their families. The FBI is caught up in a dangerous hunt for a cold-blooded murderer as they target one of the most highly skilled opponents they have ever faced. A bomber who orchestrates the death of a diplomat.
In the 1970s, South America faced a surge of political kidnappings and assassinations. When the killings spilled onto U.S. soil, it was time for the FBI to step in. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents struggled to pierce the closely guarded world of diplomats and assassins, trained spies and hired thugs, determined to stop a covert terror war waged by a rogue nation.
Washington, D.C., September 18th, 1976. A man prepares deadly revenge against one of his nation's fiercest critics.
Dear friends of Chile,
the intended victim is former Chilean ambassador Orlando Letelier. The outspoken socialist is in the U.S. condemning the military government of dictator Augusto Pinochet. The Pinochet government seized power 3 years earlier in a bloody coup. Letelier rails against the current Chilean regime for human rights violations and for stripping him of his Chilean citizenship. His outspoken criticism causes one European country to stop lending money to Chile. Just after midnight on September 19th, the bomber prepares to silence the diplomat once and for all. The radio-controlled bomb is secured under the driver's seat of Letelier's car. Now, all it needs is the right radio signal. 2 days later, Letelier drives to work. His assistant, 25-year-old Ronnie Moffat, rides in the passenger seat. Her husband, Mike, rides in back. The car soon arrives on Embassy Row.
It's an economic one, but...
Police protecting the embassies call for ambulances and rush to help. Orlando Letelier is barely alive. The bomb blew off his legs and blasted shrapnel through his torso. Ronnie Moffat, hit by flying shrapnel, fights for every breath. Mike Moffat, incredibly, escapes unhurt, although frantically worried about his wife. An ambulance rushes Letelier away just as the FBI arrives. Special Agent Carter Cornick.
When we got there, like all crime scenes, it was an absolute mess. I saw the car, and there was a woman on the side of the road being administered to. The next thing I actually heard through the din of all the noise was a young man screaming, "Dina did it." And I had no idea who or what Dina was.
Under the law, the FBI investigates all attacks against foreign officials. Agent Cornick takes charge of the case.
Well, the first thing that was to do was to get control of the crime scene. A crime scene is a unique thing. It's only there once. And what you do at that crime scene very often determines, ultimately, the outcome of the case.
Agent Cornick requests more agents, including FBI bomb experts, to collect and label every possible piece of evidence.
We had an enormous amount of help. We had more than 150 agents doing the crime scene. We actually had forensic experts doing the crime scene. And that part of the crime scene was actually run by the chief of the explosive unit at my request.
During the search, the FBI hears the tragic news from the hospital that Orlando Letelier and Ronnie Moffett have died. The case is now a murder investigation. At the U.S. District Courthouse, the U.S. Attorney decides this politically sensitive public assassination must be handled with the utmost care and urgency.
In this case, a U.S. attorney was assigned to the investigation from day one. That had never been done before, except in Watergate.
The U.S. Attorney assigns his most relentless prosecutor, U.S. Assistant Attorney Gene Proper.
It was a heinous murder, and I wanted to solve it to make sure that people knew you couldn't do it here. I don't care if Letelier was a socialist, a communist, or somebody on the far right. He was killed in a brutal way on the streets of the District of Columbia with a young woman, neither of whom deserved to die.
By the second day, investigators begin looking at possible motives for killing Letelier.
The primary motive from the beginning appeared to be a political assassination ordered by a foreign government. We had found out from the State Department that the military dictatorship of Chile was concerned that he had been personally responsible for stopping loans coming to the country.
Buenos Aires, Argentina. FBI Special Agent Bob Shearer does not want to tip off the Chilean government, so he talks with his contacts in Buenos Aires. He wants to find out if they have any information on whether Chilean intelligence may be involved. His Argentine source tells him about a secret program called Operation Condor. Intelligence agencies from right-wing South American countries have agreed to help each other watch left-wing activists and, if necessary, eliminate them. The official believes that Letelier's death may have been Condor's first kill. To get more information, the FBI turns to a U.S. State Department expert on Chile.
We need to know, and we need to know very frankly.
The expert tells them that Chile desperately needs American economic support.
International, but
The same morning of the assassination, the economics minister of Chile was getting off a plane at Dulles Airport to ask the U.S. government for economic aid to Chile.
The expert highly doubts that Chile would endanger its loans by killing Letelier.
So it was difficult for me to believe that a government would, on the one hand, order the assassination of this man, while on the other hand, trying to ask the U.S. government for aid.
And hang on, where you guys at?
2 weeks after the Letelier assassination, a commercial flight from Barbados to Cuba explodes. All 73 people aboard die. After the explosion, right-wing anti-Castro Cubans proudly claim credit. Because of the timing of the bombing of the airliner, investigators wonder if anti-Castro Cubans may have also had a hand in the assassination. Letelier was a socialist and an admirer of Fidel Castro. It seems like a long shot, but right now it's the only lead the agency has. Agent Cornick asks the FBI lab to compare the Letelier bomb against past anti-Castro Cuban bombs. Technicians have little to work with because the explosion destroyed most of the evidence. From what little remains, they determined that the bomb is unlike anything they've ever seen before. FBI Special Agent Larry Wack.
The lab came back and said basically the Letelier bomb doesn't match other right-wing Cuban bombs that we have examined already.
We didn't want to hear that. That's the last thing you want to hear, that you don't have a match.
But because of the right-wing Cubans' history of assassinations, investigators can't entirely rule them out.
We were trying to keep an open mind that perhaps we have a new bomb maker on the set that we're not aware of.
Having hit a dead end, investigators set up a tip line to solicit information from around the world.
Thousands of leads, literally thousands of leads, came in by telephone. A special 1-800 number was established to handle the leads. We had leads coming in from Europe, leads particularly from Latin America.
One lead comes from a New York area reverend who says 3 Chilean intelligence agents flew out of New York shortly after the assassination. FBI Special Agent Larry Wack interviews the reverend.
And it was evident, you know, in the first 5 minutes of the interview that this guy had seen nothing. So, of course, I'm trying to zero in on, look, you know, who exactly saw these 3 Chilean agents?
The reverend got the tip from some friends, but he will not reveal their names.
I told the reverend, I said, look, get back to the people that supposedly saw this and get them in touch with us.
While he's waiting, Agent Wack heads to New York's JFK airport. He follows up on the reverend's tip that Chilean agents flew out shortly after the assassination.
These items should be noted by the...
No one can confirm the story. The case stalls again.
There's nothing.
A few weeks later, Agent Wack says goodbye to his fiancée, who leaves for her job as an airline flight attendant. He has no idea he is not the only one who watches her go. In the airport parking lot, a threatening stranger confronts Wack's fiancée. The bombers are striking back, hitting the FBI close to home. A car bomb in Washington, D.C. kills former Chilean ambassador Orlando Letelier and his assistant. As the FBI begins investigating the murder, Special Agent Larry Wack's fiancée is threatened. The frightened flight attendant calls Agent Wack.
I was absolutely appalled that something like this would happen, that whoever it was didn't have the guts to come after me, that they had to go after her.
Agent Wack believes he must have interviewed someone close to the assassination.
I don't know what we did, but we struck a nerve somewhere. And now we got to go back and re-examine what we've been doing, and myself, particularly what I had been doing, who I had been talking to and so on, to see where this threat may have emanated from.
Agent Wack's fiancée helps create a sketch of the man who threatened her. Agents show the sketch to Chilean immigrants throughout New York, trying to find someone who recognizes the man. But no one seems to know him. Washington, D.C., 1 month after the bombing.
Clearly said in Townsend versus New York.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Propper and FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick receive a possible lead.
We got 2 Chilean.
The State Department provides photos of 2 suspicious Chilean intelligence officers whose real names are unknown. A month before the Letelier killing, at the U.S. Embassy in Paraguay, 2 Chileans requested visas for what were obviously false passports. One of the men did not look Chilean, and the 2 openly admitted being intelligence agents. They claimed they needed the visas to attend a meeting with the CIA in Washington, D.C.
Well, I'll need to see your passport.
The ambassador decided to take the unusual precaution of secretly photographing the passports.
Thank you.
When the CIA denied knowing the 2 agents, the ambassador canceled the visas.
What do we know about these guys?
Investigators believed the photos could relate to their case.
Went in for their...
Wow, we
FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick.
We had these two photographs, but we didn't know who they were. If we could identify those two people, we could take the case a step further.
The mug shots, we got to roll through the books. We got to roll these guys.
A few days later, investigators get a lead that again points them to Cuba. A Venezuelan newspaper prints a story claiming right-wing Cubans based in the United States killed Letelier. It names the prime suspects as the Ayala brothers from New Jersey. Investigators know Enrique and Sanchez Ayala well. They are founding members of a violent anti-Castro group called the Cuban Nationalist Movement. They are suspects in several recent high-profile bombings, including a Russian ship in New York 5 days before the Letelier assassination, and an attempted bombing at the New York Academy of Music, where Cuban artists were set to perform. The FBI begins to wonder if the Ayala brothers also targeted Chilean socialist Orlando Letelier. In one of New Jersey's Cuban neighborhoods, an FBI agent tracks down Enrique Ayala to find out.
Brian, I'm with the FBI.
When the agent asks him where he was the day Letelier was killed, Ayala gives an odd reply.
That's my trump card. It's an ace up my sleeve.
Investigators in Washington, D.C. find his comments suspicious.
Well, I think there's precedent.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper.
Right away, when you hear something like that, you begin to think, what's this guy want to hide?
Proper asks the FBI to serve Ayala with a subpoena to appear before the grand jury.
I told you.
In the United States, no citizen is obligated to talk to the police or the FBI. If the FBI comes up to you on the street, you can say, get lost. There is an obligation to testify before the grand jury if you're brought in by subpoena.
An agent heads out to serve Enrique Ayala with the subpoena.
FBI.
Ayala's wife says she doesn't know where he's gone. He's disappeared.
Ma'am? Hi,
Agents question anti-Castro Cubans, demanding that they give up Ayala.
FBI.
The pressure finally gets to Ayala, who agrees to come in.
Coming in, please have a seat.
At Proper's office in Washington, D.C., Ayala proclaims he had nothing to do with Letelier's death. Investigators ask why he made the comment about an ace up his sleeve.
You might have some information.
Ayala says he was just joking, pulling the agent's chain.
No, can't help me.
Proper grills Ayala before the grand jury. He denies any knowledge of the Letelier murder and takes the fifth when asked if he has recently traveled to Chile. New York City. A few days after Ayala's testimony, Special Agent Wack gets a call at home from a suspected anti-Castro bomber.
Do what?
He said that, I'm coming over to your house in a minute to talk to you.
Agent Wack fears he is in danger.
The big question was, how did he get my phone number? And more importantly, how did he know where I lived? So I grabbed my neighbor, who was a New York City police officer, told him, grab your gun, come outside, and I told him what had happened, that I had gotten this phone call, and I don't know what's coming next. We hid outside in an alleyway, and within a period of about 3 minutes, here comes this nationalist guy at my front door.
Yeah, it's him. He recognizes me.
We had an altercation out in front of my residence where he was telling us, that they didn't have anything to do with the threat on my fiance, and, why don't you back off of our group? I pretty much told him that the next time you show up at my front door, you're going to go home in a body bag. I was extremely mad at this whole situation. I mean, it was bad enough that my fiance gets threatened, and now I got these bombers showing up at my front door, and you're like, what's next?
Far from backing off, Agent Wack cranks up the pressure. If the Cubans are nervous, the FBI must be close to finding their connection to the assassination, and possibly even the bomber. Agent Wack goes after the Cubans, hunting for anyone with information.
If you think you're going to intimidate the FBI into not investigating, you're making a mistake. You're going to make them investigate harder.
I don't know nothing about it.
The people he approaches give him the cold shoulder or even insult him.
Hey, get away from me.
But he continues to hunt for leads. Finally, 5 weeks after Letelier's murder, Agent Wack meets a former Cuban bomb maker who says he wants to talk. It could be a major break in the case. Or it could be a setup for a hit on an FBI agent who's getting too close to the truth. A powerful remote-controlled bomb kills former Chilean ambassador Orlando Letelier and his assistant in Washington, D.C. The FBI believes the key to the case may be hiding in the New York anti-communist Cuban community, an organization known for targeting outspoken socialists. FBI Special Agent Larry Wack doggedly hunts for leads until a former anti-Castro bomb maker tells him he wants to talk.
And the thing that he couldn't sleep with was he didn't care that Letelier died. He couldn't sleep with the fact that the girl was killed, Ronnie Moffett. And that's where he drew the line.
The bomb maker says he's heard that Enrique Ayala, the leader of a violent anti-Castro group, has met several times with a Chilean covert contact. He said the Cubans wanted support from the right-wing Chilean government. Agent Wack uses the information to question other informants. They tell him that Ayala has been seen meeting with a tall, blonde Chilean with a military bearing.
One informant was telling me that the nationalists were referring to him as El Flaco, or the tall, thin one.
Agent Wack has now confirmed the link between a Chilean agent and the Cuban nationalist movement.
Now you've got evidence of a Chilean agent in contact with the nationalists, and you've got the nationalists with a track record of bombings going back quite a few years. So, you know, it's starting to look like a duck and walk like a duck.
The FBI focuses their investigation on Chile. In Santiago, FBI Special Agent Bob Shearer follows up on Agent Wack's discovery of Enrique Ayala's link with Chilean officials. Chile's Interpol representative tells him that Ayala visited Chile 2 years earlier and may have met with the Chilean government or even the Chilean intelligence service. With this new information, Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper subpoenas Enrique Ayala and 2 of his friends to appear once more before the grand jury. A few days later, Proper gets a death threat on his private line.
What's wrong?
Proper believes they must be doing something that's making a guilty party nervous.
That means we're doing it right.
But instead of backing off, Proper and FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick step up their investigation.
We decided we're taking the 5th.
They bring in Enrique Ayala, who says he and his 2 friends will take the 5th in front of the grand jury and refuse to answer any questions. Investigators must continue to search for some way to crack open the case and get someone to talk.
Gentlemen?
FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick.
This thing is dragged on now, nothing happened, but it's not coming to a head. How the hell do we get on track?
A month later in New York, the Secret Service calls in FBI Special Agent Larry Wack. They've arrested a counterfeiter who specializes in making fake IDs who wants to cut a deal. He claims to know of a plot by the Ayala brothers to kill the U.S. Attorney General and Prosecutor Eugene Proper. After months of investigation, this could be the break in the case the FBI has been waiting for. The break that will finally lead them to the bombers. In Washington, D.C., a remote-control bomb kills a former left-wing Chilean ambassador and his assistant. In New York, 8 months after the assassination, a counterfeiter contacts the FBI. He provides fake IDs to an anti-communist Cuban group suspected of the bombing. The counterfeiter claims to have inside information and wants to cut a deal with FBI Special Agent Larry Wack.
He laid out a situation that he was in the process of making up false driver's licenses and passports and whatnot for some of the guys in the nationalist movement. You know, your first assumption is this crowd's getting ready to take off. They're going underground.
The counterfeiter says the Cuban nationalists told him that if their leader, Enrique Ayala, goes to jail, they will kill the U.S. Attorney General and Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper, the prosecutor on the case.
Well, what you're saying is
Agent
true.
Wack offers to speak to the Secret Service on the counterfeiter's behalf if he will inform on Enrique Ayala and his brother Sanchez.
Okay. And you're willing to follow through on this?
The counterfeiter reluctantly agrees. He says he's supposed to meet with Sanchez Ayala soon to deliver a false ID. The night of the meeting, Agent Wack watches from hiding. The counterfeiter arrives carrying a false ID hidden in a magazine.
We were able to corroborate a lot of what he was telling us without him knowing it.
When they see Ayala exit the restaurant with the same magazine, the FBI knows that their new informant told the truth about working with the Ayalas. Maybe the Ayalas can lead them to their Chilean contact. Proper again calls Enrique Ayala into court, but he fails to appear. FBI agents can't find him anywhere. He's become a fugitive. This only adds to investigators' belief that he played a role in Letelier's assassination. 2.5 weeks later, the investigators' inside man delivers more fake IDs to Sanchez Ayala. At the end of the meeting, Sanchez rips $1 in two and gives the counterfeiter half. Sanchez says that a tall, blonde Chilean may contact the counterfeiter with the other half of the bill.
You know, this was turning into a James Bond spy novel here with the $50 bills and everything, the way this thing was going. But there was that tall, blonde Chilean again that we already heard about surfacing. He was this continuous, elusive guy.
The FBI doubts this mysterious Chilean intelligence agent will come all the way to America again to meet with their counterfeiter. Chilean intelligence can fabricate their own high-quality fake IDs. Agents follow Sanchez Ayala to Miami, hoping he will lead them to his fugitive brother. But after days of trailing Sanchez, they lose him. 2 weeks later, the FBI gets an unlikely break when a tall, blonde Chilean approaches the counterfeiter. At first, the Chilean casually chats with him about motorcycles. But before he leaves, he says that a friend of Enrique Ayala's will be in touch for more false IDs. When he hears about the tall, blonde Chilean, Agent Wack arranges an urgent meeting with the counterfeiter. Agent Wack shows the counterfeiter a photo layout, including a passport photo of a Chilean intelligence agent who tried to get into the U.S. using the false name Juan Williams.
Showed him the pictures, and he goes right to the Williams photo, and he says, "This is the guy that I met, absolutely no question about it."
Investigators finally have a name to link to the mysterious stranger. They go to Chile to try and learn all they can about the man who calls himself Juan Williams. In Santiago, FBI Special Agent Bob Shearer discovers that no one named Juan Williams works for the government or the armed forces. Washington, D.C. It has been 1 year since the assassination of former left-wing Chilean ambassador Orlando Letelier and his assistant Ronnie Moffat. Investigators believe the right-wing anti-Castro Cubans working with people inside Chile's intelligence agency possibly orchestrated the murder. Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper tries to make sense of the lead so far.
The case started to slow down in mid to late 1977 because while we had this information, we didn't really have a whole lot of proof. And we were trying to get information from Chile without a lot of success.
Investigators decide to approach the Chilean government directly and demand information on the intelligence agent who is meeting with Cuban bomb makers in the U.S. and uses the false name Juan Williams.
Chile's got what appears to be a bona fide intelligence agent running around with a bunch of bombers in the United States, and this is going to be very embarrassing for Chile. They better have a good answer for this one.
In Santiago, Chile,
what is it that I can do for you today?
Agent Shearer tells a Chilean official that the FBI wants to interview Juan Williams and another intelligence agent who also applied for a U.S. visa using a false name.
You're quite sure? We have some photos of them.
The U.S. could prosecute both men for filing for a visa with a fake passport. The Chileans say they will look into it.
But we have a very large organization.
After waiting a month with no reply from Chile, Proper files court papers with an unsealed cover letter that includes the agents' false names and implies they played a major role in Letelier's murder. If the Chilean government masterminded the killing, Proper intends to hold them accountable.
I summarized what I thought the evidence would show and put it in a letter that was outside the package. Nobody had ever seen that done before, and the State Department sort of laughed about it. But I thought when that became public, and I made sure it became public because it was not a sealed document, the Chileans would panic and would start to hear things. Then what happened is the photographs which were in there sealed leaked to the press.
News stories hit front pages all over the world, accusing the Chilean intelligence service called DINA of the killing.
And the Chileans went crazy because all of a sudden it was saying DINA was involved with the Cubans in killing Letelier. Didn't say 100%. And the Chileans started calling us. They wanted a meeting with the Secretary of State. They wanted a meeting with the Attorney General.
The newspaper articles unleash a flood of tips for the FBI. One newspaper identifies the mysterious blonde intelligence agent known as Juan Williams.
You can see on the screen there.
In a shocking twist, it reveals that he was born in the U.S. The FBI is stunned. Could it be possible that the Chilean assassin is an American? While the FBI investigates the 1976 car bomb killing of Orlando Letelier and his aide Ronnie Moffat, newspapers all over the world pick up the story of two Chilean intelligence officers suspected of the killings. When the story breaks, the FBI gets word that a newspaper has identified the intelligence agent known as Juan Williams.
Juan Williams.
What do you know? One Chilean newspaper just identified.
It appears he's an American.
Michael Townley.
All right, run that name through U.S. passport, get on the horn right away.
FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick.
When it turned out one of them was a U.S. national, that made our position so much stronger. And why was a U.S. national working for the Chilean intelligence service?
The U.S. Passport Office reports that there is a Michael Townley who matches the description of the blonde intelligence agent currently registered as an American living in Chile. He's 36, born in Iowa, but grew up in Chile. Agents head to Fort Lauderdale to follow up another tip that Juan Williams is really a man named Kenneth Einart. He's been buying electronic surveillance equipment for the Chilean government. At an electronics store that sells hidden microphones, phone taps, and other high-tech surveillance equipment, the store owner identifies the Juan Williams passport photo as Kenneth Einart. The owner provides records showing that Einart shopped at the store the day the bomb killed Letelier. He also provides an official letter from the Chilean government authorizing Kenneth Einart and Michael Townley to make purchases on their behalf. The FBI now believes that Kenneth Einart is an alias for Michael Townley and that the Chilean government is somehow involved in the killing. Now, the FBI has their first solid suspect in the case. The next day in New York, FBI Special Agent Larry Wack meets with a counterfeiter turned informant. He's been watching a group of anti-communist Cuban nationalists the FBI suspects of working with the government of Chile. Agent Wack wants to know how they are responding to the news that the FBI has identified their Chilean contact, Michael Townley.
Everybody in the exile community with the nationalists and everywhere else went scrambling. It was like, uh-oh, cat's out of the bag. They know who he is. And it was time to run.
Agent Wack pressures the counterfeiter to set up a meeting with a key Cuban nationalist suspect before he runs.
I told the counterfeiter, I said, just tell him flat out that I came to see you. I found out that you're hanging with the nationalists again, and that I paid you a visit, and you're getting subpoenaed to the grand jury.
The plan works, and the counterfeiter meets with the suspect to ask his advice.
They ask you to testify.
The suspect tells him to take the fifth and say nothing.
To plead the fifth.
The counterfeiter keeps asking why.
Because we did it.
We did it, meaning Letelier. We did it. We know it. They know it. Let them prove it. Which is exactly what we wanted.
The FBI now has an informant's claim that a nationalist confessed. But they still need some physical evidence linking the Cubans with Michael Townley.
We couldn't connect him to the murder. We had no evidence he was involved in the murder, but we certainly believed it because he was the blonde Chilean who was dealing with the Cuban nationalist movement that internally had said they're involved in the Letelier murder, and they were now fleeing. They were running from us.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper and FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick try to fit together the evidence.
You know, it's one thing to have a source who you may or may not trust 100% tell you one thing. It's another thing to have, actual proof.
Investigators desperately need someone to cooperate and confess to what happened. They hope it will be Michael Townley, but the agents have to find him first.
The next step was to go to Chile and to try to, in some way, force the government of Chile to cooperate with us in the investigation. The fact that these two men had applied for false passports to come to the United States a week before the assassination was of real interest to us.
Over the next 2 weeks, Proper and the U.S. government put tremendous pressure on Chile. Proper prepares official letters through the World Court requesting the chance to talk with Townley.
I took him to the chief judge in Washington, and he signed the documents. He asked me how the case was going. I'll never forget this. He said, "How's the case going?" I said, "It's a very tough case, Judge. It's just very tough." He said, "I know that." He said, "But God makes people who do things like this make mistakes. All you've got to do is find the mistakes."
To find the mistakes, Proper has to get to Townley. But the prosecutor is still getting resistance from the Chilean government.
I'm sorry.
And the Chilean government said, this is going to make the government fall. We can't give over an intelligence officer. We said, he's an American. He committed a crime in the United States. We want him.
We were not allowed access to people that we wanted to have access to, members of the Chilean intelligence service. But at the same time, other Chilean officials were cooperating with us quietly.
Behind the scenes, the Pinochet government quietly cuts a deal with the U.S. They will hand over Townley if the U.S. promises not to use his testimony against Chile. The U.S. agrees. The next day, Chilean police take Michael Townley for a drive. He hopes that the intelligence service will protect him, perhaps even reward him with a long vacation in a remote area.
Just take me far, get out of here, huh?
He has no idea what is really waiting for him.
On vacation, huh?
Chilean intelligence agent and bombing suspect Michael Townley thinks he's about to embark on a vacation. But FBI agents are waiting at the airport for authorities to turn him over. FBI Special Agent Carter Cornick.
There was an Air Ecuadoriano flight going from Chile to New York. And the plane was held by the Chilean government on the runway until we got there. Townley was turned over to us. He was disoriented. He was afraid. He could not believe that the Chilean government had betrayed him.
On the flight, Townley refuses to talk without a lawyer. Once in the U.S., the FBI holds Townley at the Marine base in Quantico, Virginia. They suspect him of murdering a Chilean diplomat and enlisting right-wing Cubans to help him. But the only real charge they have against him is using a fake passport. Townley meets with his attorney, while Assistant U.S. Attorney Gene Proper prepares for plea negotiations.
And it's going to be very difficult because we really don't have a murder case against Townley. We still did not have any case against Michael Townley except the passport violation case.
Miami, Florida.
Hey man, hold up. That's Ayala.
Agents get a break when an alert Miami police officer spots one of the men linked to Townley in the murder, Cuban nationalist leader Enrique Ayala.
You're Enrique Ayala, aren't you? No, sir. Please take off your sunglasses. This is my identification, sir.
Seguro que sí.
Agent Cornick and Prosecutor Proper use Ayala's arrest and the arrests of other nationalist suspects to pressure Townley.
Enrique Ayala has been arrested.
We went to Townley and his lawyer and said, your time's about out. We've just rolled the Cubans up. We're going to make the deal with the first person who's willing to talk to us. We knew the Cubans would never talk, but we didn't tell that to Townley and his lawyers. Townley has to think we know what happened. We singled him out and brought him to the United States. He has to worry that we have more information than he knows about. But all we had on Michael Townley was a passport violation and knowledge that he had met with the Cubans. But unless the Cubans talked or Townley talked, we didn't have enough to bring a case against anybody.
Don't worry, Michael.
After hours of negotiation, Townley agrees to cooperate in exchange for a 10-year sentence. Townley reveals that he worked as a highly skilled agent and assassin for Chilean intelligence.
He worked for the Chilean secret police, which was run by a general, and he viewed his assassinations as legitimate orders from his government. The Chilean secret police wanted Letelier dead because Letelier was viewed as a spokesman who was in the United States and creating a fuss against the Pinochet government. He was meeting on Congress with senators, he was talking around the world, and the Pinochet government was a very repressive, right-wing government, and Letelier was very well-spoken, and he was causing them some grief.
This was not Townley's first assassination.
Given an order, military operation, and that's what...
As an expert in electronics and bomb making, Townley helped commit assassinations in South America, North America, and Europe.
This man, without question, was the most dangerous man I have ever met. This is a man who bragged about his role in building bombs that killed other people. And the justification? Letelier was a soldier, I was a soldier.
Townley says he made a bomb in a motel room and attached it to Letelier's car at night. The Cubans were anxious to create ties to the right-wing Chilean government and agreed to help. Townley arranged for the Cubans to set the bomb off. He then flew to Florida leaving 2 of the Cubans with a remote control. He says he doesn't know who pushed the button.
The Cubans had no interest in Mr. Letelier. They wanted a relationship with the Chilean secret police for several reasons. Chile could give them sanctuary when they were in trouble in the United States. They had a very similar political ideology, was very right-wing. And they could get, they thought, material support, maybe money, from Dina.
To prove Townley's story to a jury, the FBI buys an identical car and has him build an exact copy of the bomb.
All of this was filmed by the FBI so that it could be used at trial, actually to placing the bomb up underneath the car. All of the components were identical, the car was identical, and the question was, would the results be identical? We didn't know.
Stand by for detonation. 3, 2, 1.
When the dust cleared, I looked at the car that had just been blown up. It was the same car that I had seen 2 years ago in the crime scene. I could not believe it. I turned to look at Mike Townley. Mike Townley's face was ashen. He turned to me and said, "I'd like to leave." I had 2 of the other agents take him back to the car.
Townley was somebody who had been involved in several murders, but never close up. He always did it at a distance. He never saw the victim. He was a soldier. He was told to assassinate somebody. He put a bomb somewhere. He did something, but he didn't do it close up. And when he saw the effects of it, he was apparently very affected by it.
2.5 years after the Letelier assassination, the Ayala brothers and an associate go on trial. The photos of the 2 blown-up cars provide the crowning piece of evidence.
The resemblance was remarkable. At the end of 7 weeks of trial, the jury, when it deliberated, asked for 2 pieces of evidence. One were the pictures of the cars. An hour later, they came back guilty on all counts.
The court sentences Enrique and Sanchez Ayala in the murder plot. But in a retrial, their convictions are overturned on a technicality. Over the next 20 years, 2 other anti-Castro nationalists and 3 Chilean officials end up serving time for the Letelier killing. FBI agent Carter Cornick sees Letelier's murder as a tragic misunderstanding.
I think he was assassinated for 2 reasons. One, for what he had done, which was stopping government Dutch loans to Chile. And 2, they perceived him as a threat, which in reality he was not. The Chilean military believed that Letelier was forming a government in exile in the United States. It was simply not valid. It's just paranoia.
Documents uncovered after the fall of Chilean dictator Augusto Pinochet would later confirm that the Chilean government ordered the death of Letelier. The FBI's relentless pursuit of the killers solved a difficult case and put rogue nations on notice.
I think it sent a message to other governments considering extraterritorial sanctions, assassinations. Think twice before you do it.
small town in Nevada faces disaster. A holiday weekend, 250,000 tourists, and a 1,000-pound bomb that could explode at any second. The device cannot be disarmed. It cannot be moved without detonating.
Here we have the all clear. Stand by for
For the
countdown.
FBI, it's a worst-case scenario.
In 1980, the FBI faced the largest explosive device they had ever seen. The bomb was sophisticated, carefully constructed, and designed to destroy an entire building. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents and bomb experts responded from all over the country. Their mission, to disarm the deadly device and stop the dangerous extortionists who built it.
State Line, Nevada is a small tourist town straddling the border with California. The town has just 1,300 residents. The largest industry is gambling. With all that cash lying around, it makes an appealing target for criminals looking to make a big score. August 26, 1980, 5:30 a.m. at the receiving entrance of Harvey's Casino. Two men tell security they're delivering a new copy machine. The security guard gives them directions to the executive offices on the second floor. He has no idea what he has let in the building. This is no copier. Shortly after 6 a.m., a security guard making rounds notices something unusual. The door to the executive office is jammed. It looks like the lock has been glued shut. He manages to get the door open. The guard notices a bizarre-looking metal box in the middle of the room. On the floor, he finds a letter. According to the letter, the metal box contains a massive bomb. The guard contacts the Douglas County Sheriff's Department. Captain Ron Perini.
It was about 6:30 in the morning, and I received a call from one of my sergeants who told me that they had found a device at Harvey's Casino.
Perini calls in the Tahoe Douglas bomb squad. The device is huge and made of metal. According to the letter, it contains 1,000 pounds of TNT. That much TNT could blow up everything within 500 feet of the casino. The letter also says the bomb has 3 separate timers, each set for different explosion times. The device cannot be moved. It cannot be disarmed. Unless authorities come up with $3 million in cash, the bomber threatens to blow up Harvey's Casino. He also threatens that if the FBI thwarts this plan, then the bomber will strike the same hotel again.
Yeah, this thing was big, and if it was real, and it did go off at that time, none of us would be alive.
The complexity of the design and amount of TNT tells law enforcement this bomber means business. This device could blow up the entire block, and the police don't even know when it is set to go off. the bomber is holding all the cards.
There was no indication from the bomb squad members that this was a false bomb, that it was just a shell. They felt it was very real. So there was a lot of issues going on at one time. How are we going to secure this? How are we going to provide the safety for everyone?
The casino is packed with gamblers. The hotel is full of guests. With a bomb that size, police have to get the hundreds of innocent people to safety. Over the next several hours, 600 hotel guests are moved to a nearby high school.
And it's scary, to tell you the truth. It's very scary. If this bomb would have gone off in that casino, we would have lost 600 people.
As the guests are being evacuated, Captain Perini assesses the situation and determines he needs help.
We're a relatively small department. We certainly don't have the expertise as some agencies may have in dealing with extortions and the resources and the money and all the things that go with that to do a proper investigation. So because it was an extortion, we called the FBI immediately.
Special Agent Bill Junkie.
We typically have extortion attempts at the casino, the state line. We've had those before. We've had plenty of small bombs placed here and there in various casinos.
At this time, the FBI was receiving nearly 100 extortion threats a year against casinos, but they were seldom this serious.
But I never, in my wildest dreams, envisioned a bomb of this size and this complexity.
There are 28 toggle switches on the top box. Each one is numbered.
They were all in the same position, in a downward position, except for one toggle switch, which was numbered 23. That was in the up position. We didn't know when we looked at those toggle switches, of course, what they went to, what they were for.
Any one of the switches could deactivate the bomb or detonate it.
They gave me a letter, which turned out to be an extortion letter, that identified various components of that bomb. And reading that letter, I realized we had a big problem here. The letter indicated to us that there was 1,000 pounds of TNT in this bomb. And judging from the size of the large box, I think it was pretty consistent that 1,000 pounds of TNT could fit into that larger box.
1,000 pounds of TNT has a huge blast radius, enough to destroy more than one casino. That would devastate this small town.
We blocked off the casino corridor area on US 50, made sure no vehicles could go through. We told the other casinos to vacate the immediate area near Harvey's, and they did that. They even boarded up some of the windows to make sure that if there was an explosion, that would cause the glass to break and hurt others.
As the sheriff's department closes down the streets, the bomb squad works on the device. The crew does not wear their bulky bomb suits because nothing could protect them if a bomb this size detonated. First, they want to know exactly what's inside the metal casing.
What kind of bomb is it? How big of an explosion is it going to be? Is it going to affect the businesses across the street? Or how far will it go? Is there chemicals involved? Is there even nuclear stuff?
Herb Hawkins is the assistant special agent in charge at the FBI's Las Vegas field office.
Well, the device was x-rayed in parts because no x-ray machine was that big. So about a third of the device was x-rayed, then another third, then another third.
In all, the bomb squad takes over 200 x-rays. They also photograph the device and dust for fingerprints. Getting paint samples is much riskier, but for the FBI, it could be an important clue to identifying the bomber.
Ultimately, we may find a guy who's got that kind of paint in his garage.
Investigators also find a small drop of blood on one corner of the device. It is collected as potential evidence.
We may be able to find a guy whose blood matches that which was taken off the bomb. That's a good investigative lead for us.
The latent fingerprints, paint, and blood samples are sent to the FBI lab in Washington, D.C. In the lab, technicians will analyze the evidence in the hopes it will lead them to the bomber. But for the agents on the scene, the first priority is to disarm this bomb. In the command post, Investigators study the x-rays of the device.
The bottom 3/4 of this lower box was very high density. The x-rays couldn't penetrate it. That told us, in essence, that it was explosive in there, or some kind of material in there filling that bottom box. We could see wires from the top box going into that material in the bottom box. We presume those were wires from the detonators, from the blasting caps, into that explosive material.
Scientists from NEST, the Nuclear Emergency Search Team, analyzed the bottom portion of the bomb to calculate the potential blast radius.
They estimated that we were looking at about a 1,500 to 2,500 foot blast area where damage could be somewhat significant. And of course, inside of 800 yards, we're looking at more than severe damage, and of course total destruction within 200-meter radius.
We realized this guy knew what he was doing, that it was going to be an extremely difficult bomb to defeat, if it could be defeated at all.
Agents are in an impossible position, but they must find a way to disarm this bomb, and fast, before anyone gets hurt. In State Line, Nevada, extortionists plant a massive bomb in a crowded casino. The bombers demand $3 million, or they will detonate the device. Within hours of the discovery of the bomb, investigators from all over the area arrive in State Line. Sheriffs from Douglas County, police from South Lake Tahoe, as well as El Dorado County. Special Agent Bill Jonke.
They started just flooding in because they knew we would have a lot of work to do. We began bringing in FBI agents from surrounding districts almost immediately.
As bomb experts work on the device, agents go after the extortionists.
We needed every patron in that casino to be interviewed with the chance that maybe they had seen something, a vehicle being involved in the delivery of this bomb, something.
Authorities set up toll-free hotlines. Captain Ron Perini and the Douglas County Sheriff's Department work closely with the FBI.
We want to know if there's any witnesses, if anybody saw these people bring the device into the casino. What about vehicles, descriptions?
The FBI questions the security guard. He tells them about seeing two men delivering a copy machine around 5:30 a.m. They were driving a white van.
We knew that we may have a white van involved in this. We knew by then exactly what time that bomb came through the casino. We knew we had two people pushing and pulling that device.
Investigators try to locate all the white vans in the Lake Tahoe area.
Law enforcement officers were stopping these vans and finding out who the operators were.
While agents on the street search for possible suspects, technicians continue to analyze the device. But the news is not good. This bomb is formidable.
On that first day after the diagnostic work, the x-rays, the interpretation of that extortion letter, we realized that we weren't going to move that bomb. That we, in fact, had a viable, functioning, live explosive device. We didn't know what the explosive inside was. We also figured we had explosives in that top box that made any sort of render-safe procedure extremely, extremely difficult. By late afternoon, we decided that we were not going to penetrate this bomb with any equipment that we had or that was developed anywhere in the country.
It appears the bomber has won. The FBI must take a new approach. They're going to have to cooperate. That evening, agents meet with Harvey Gross, the owner of Harvey's Casino.
We thought we might have a very good opportunity to arrest, to identify the people involved in this crime through the delivery of the money. So we wanted to comply with the instructions.
The bomber wants $3 million delivered to a remote location via helicopter. In exchange, authorities will receive instructions on how to move the bomb and detonate it safely.
We told them the problems we were having with this bomb, and we had a window there that was closing as far as getting the money together or deciding what we were going to do.
Agents feel that $3 million in cash is the fastest way to find him. The casino owner is skeptical.
And he said to us, "What are you going to try and do with this person?" And we said, "We are going to try and catch him." And he said, "Well, if you're going to do that, I'm not giving him $3 million. So he gave us $5,000, which we appropriately marked, and the rest was cut up paper.
An FBI pilot will fly the helicopter. Since the bomber has forbidden any radio contact, the pilot will wear a wire. He must land at a designated spot at South Lake Tahoe Airport no later than 11 p.m. At 12:05, he will receive further instructions.
He specified that no law enforcement be involved in this operation whatsoever. Well, that was pretty unrealistic. We, of course, had numerous law enforcement people stationed and concealed throughout that airport in an effort to identify anyone that could be seen near that airport that might be linked to this extortion attempt.
The pilot lands at South Lake Tahoe Airport at exactly 11 o'clock. In a nearby building, a team of FBI agents and police monitor the pilot's wire.
We were waiting for contact from the bomber. And at 12:05, just as he said, the telephone rang in the telephone booth.
Okay.
The caller instructs the pilot to look under the shelf of the phone booth. There he will find further instructions.
Follow Highway 50 to the west, the right-hand side in a straight line.
He read that note aloud as he stood there outside the phone booth. That allowed us to hear and to know what that letter contained, and we immediately dispatched ground units in the direction that he was told to fly.
The pilot is instructed to fly west along Highway 50 at an altitude of 500 feet. At some point, he will see a strobe light where he is to land.
Not much altitude in the mountains like that. Very, very low, very, very hazardous for a helicopter to be that low at midnight. We were going to do the best we could to provide ground coverage for the protection of our pilot, and also obviously to arrest, to apprehend this perpetrator if that was at all possible. So immediately we had cars traveling westbound on Highway 50 for the sole purpose of either one, encountering the subject or the suspect in this case, or two, ensuring the safety of our pilot.
A SWAT team flying 1,000 feet above the FBI helicopter will provide added security.
The thing that always makes you more apprehensive is the unknown. We didn't know who you were dealing with. We didn't know if we had 10 people, one person, 2 dozen that were going to meet that airplane.
The FBI pilot flies west, following Route 50. He maintains an altitude of exactly 500 feet as he searches for the strobe light.
That wire, please. I just fought.
There is nothing but darkness below. It seems the bomber is playing some sort of deadly game, and the FBI is at his mercy. State Line, Nevada, 1980. An FBI helicopter searches a 15-mile stretch of Highway 50 for a signal from below. The extortionist who planted a massive bomb in a local casino has demanded $3 million. Agents know that appearing to comply is their best hope for arresting the bomb maker. The pilot flies through the mountains in the dark at an altitude of only 500 feet. He sees no signal from below. Assistant Special Agent in Charge Herb Hawkins controls the search operation from the ground.
He came back, he flew it again. And he flew it again. We kept sending him back down the route.
We're looking where close we can go. We got trees and wires down here.
Then after he got through with his 15 miles, we put him at 250, 300 feet, which he was scared to death. This was an experienced Marine helicopter pilot who joined the FBI. And he's flying treetops, trying to comply with and make this successful. And he keeps calling me, Herb, I got nothing. I have nothing. Everything's quiet, you know. And so I said, okay. Then at 4 o'clock, we brought him back.
Stand by.
It seems the bomber has won again. All the FBI's attempts to establish contact with him have failed. If he doesn't want the money, what does he want? Agents turn to their only other lead, the airport telephone booth where the bomber left instructions for the pilot. Special Agent Bill Jonke.
We, of course, examined that telephone booth for latent fingerprints, and we interviewed a few people, but we basically came up with nothing. Nobody had seen anything at that airport that was suspicious in nature. So that was a dead end. We had not established contact with the extortionist. And that was of grave concern to us because we needed more communication.
The next morning, the FBI asks Governor Robert List of Nevada to hold a press conference. He needs to convince the bomber to reestablish contact.
This request is made due to a failure of enlightenment and a confusion in following the previous directions. The hotel is prepared to comply and is standing by as before.
We had basically silence on Wednesday. I think that the people were too cautious to make another contact.
For the Tahoe Douglas bomb squad, it's a potentially deadly dilemma. How can they move the bomb without knowing what's inside?
It was very heavy. It was made of steel, and it was loaded with up to 1,000 pounds of explosive. We couldn't just pick it up and carry it out of there. We realized to even move it, even if we had a safe way to move it, would require 3 to 4 people. That's way too many to have anywhere near a device that could explode.
Even if they can move the device to the parking lot, then what?
We, in essence, have a giant hand grenade here. If it exploded, it would send steel shrapnel all over the place. We really couldn't afford to have it outside.
Agents and bomb experts do not know if the massive bomb is set on a timer, if the extortionist can set the bomb off remotely, or exactly how volatile the explosive material inside is. They have some hard decisions to make. One member of the team makes a radical suggestion.
Our experts told us, and we all agreed, that if we could explosively separate this top box, knock it off the bottom box at a very, very fast speed with explosives, we could defeat the electrical current from the battery that was being generated and maybe avoid a detonation of the main charge.
The plan is to use 6 pounds of plastic explosives to destroy the top box. In essence, the bomb's brain.
If they could sever that pulse from actually going down to the dynamite, it may not go off.
Everything depends on whether or not the top box is also rigged with explosives.
If the top box contained dynamite, then our explosive separation would fail because, in essence, the bomb would, what we call, sympathetically detonate. In other words, the explosion from our attempt to remove the top box would detonate all the explosives in the bomb.
It's a risky procedure. The entire casino could be destroyed. They need permission from hotel owner Harvey Gross.
And what he did say was, as long as nobody gets hurt, we can't keep doing what we're doing. We're going on for hours and hours and hours, and nobody can come up with a solution other than that, then that's okay. There was tears in his eyes, and he basically was giving us a directive that you take care of everyone here. Make sure nobody's harmed. I don't want anybody hurt. If the device does go off and it destroys a casino, we can rebuild it.
The bomb squad sets up a linear-shaped charge, positioning the explosives to destroy the top box.
Wires were run from the explosive charge to a window outside and eventually to a firing point out in the parking lot.
there is no way to know whether the shaped charge will successfully disable the bomb or detonate it.
We hoped that we would separate that top box and that there were in fact no explosives in there and we'd have no detonation. But we were fully prepared, and I have to say we expected detonation of up to 1,000 pounds of TNT, as the letter had indicated. So we were prepared for that when we fired that shape charge.
At 3:55 p.m., Sheriff Jerry Maple broadcasts a warning. The disarming attempt is about to begin.
Okay, we have the all clear. Everybody stand by.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
In a casino in Nevada, FBI agents face the biggest bomb they've ever seen. A device packed with 1,000 pounds of explosives. Their only option, blow the control box off the top of the bomb with a small explosive charge.
All units stand by for countdown, please.
Special Agent Bill Jonke watches from the roof of a nearby casino.
We had high-speed cameras prepared for the detonation. We were watching. We were keeping our fingers crossed. We, of course, could hear over the radio literally the countdown.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
The plan has failed. Part of the casino has been reduced to rubble. Assistant Special Agent in Charge Herb Hawkins.
We had a major mess on our hands. We had a hotel that had been blown downward 2 stories, blown upward 2 stories. Numerous pieces of device, rebar, concrete, chips, wall, desks, furniture, all mashed up, and in some of it in the hotel, down in the hole. Some of it up on the 2nd and 3rd floor, and a bunch of it out in the parking lot.
All of us probably had the same thought. We were thankful that we had not a single person with as much as a scratch. Nobody was hurt. We felt relief that the bomb, in essence, was gone. There was not a danger from that bomb anymore. Having to go back up on it for a day or 2 was getting stressful for everybody. So we felt a relief when that thing went off. If you destroy or damage a building, that can be rebuilt. But loss of human life or casualties is something that can never be healed. Myself and a few of the bomb technicians went into that building right away, right after detonation. However, it was pretty dangerous.
Rubble is everywhere, and the FBI is concerned the rest of the building might collapse. Once it is secured, agents go back into the casino to search for clues.
We commenced a very thorough crime scene investigation, as you would have to do in a bombing case, as your crime scene is really the key to helping you solve the puzzle.
But in this devastation, finding those clues will not be easy.
When a bomb goes off, the components just don't evaporate. They become much smaller and obviously disfigured, but they're there. They're there in the rubble. They're there in the crater at the bottom. They're there. Our job is to find them and identify them as components of the bomb.
Authorities estimate it could take nearly 6 weeks to process the crime scene. The FBI can't afford to give the bomber that much time to cover his tracks. Within days of the explosion, the state-line casinos offer a $250,000 reward for the arrest and conviction of the extortionists.
We hit every news media outlet with that information in hopes of somebody calling. We generated and started a hotline, a 1-800 hotline, so that anybody in the country could call us toll-free and provide information for this reward.
The offer of a large reward brings thousands of leads, but no solid information.
Several days went by, I'd say 7, 8, 9, 10 days, and we got leads from this offer, but we didn't get what we considered to be viable leads from this. The group that was responsible for building and placing this bomb was probably very close-knit, maybe even a family, because we weren't getting any information.
Agents hope that in the rubble they will find one piece of evidence that will lead them to the bomber.
At the end of the 40 days, we'd recovered approximately 108 pounds of a bomb that we felt probably weighed around 800 pounds. So we recovered about an eighth of it. The items that we recovered primarily were heavy steel items that survived the blast.
As each piece of the bomb is recovered, it is shipped to the FBI laboratory in Washington, D.C. This is the first opportunity the agents have to really study the bomb.
We were able to determine the type of switches that were used, the mercury switches, the type of explosive, pieces of cardboard box, things that would point where and how the device was constructed.
Laboratory analysis tells agents a lot about the bomb and something about the bomber.
One of the early things that we did was have the metallurgists look at the bomb components we were recovering and determine the stresses on those pieces of metal from a metallurgical point of view to tell us what forces were exerted against them in the blast. And by doing that, we could put a family of explosives into this. And while the threat letter said it was TNT, we're not about to take that on face value. We want to know that the damage was consistent with an explosive like TNT, which it was not. So right away we know something about the bomber. He didn't tell the truth in the letter. He was trying to tell us something that would get your attention.
The bomber used dynamite instead of TNT. Because TNT is more powerful, he probably mentioned it to intimidate investigators.
It was a very complex scheme, and therefore, when you looked at the device, a complex mind had to have put this together. A very painstaking, patient individual. This was not built in a day. This was a device that looked like it had taken weeks, if not months, to build. And to build it without drawing attention probably required even more time.
To try and learn more about the bomber, agents asked for assistance from FBI profilers at the Behavioral Science Unit then housed at the FBI complex at Quantico. Profilers determined the bomber is probably a male, in his late 30s or early 40s, with some sort of bomb-making experience. Based on the complexity of the device and the letter, they feel the bomber is egocentric. He believes he can outsmart investigators.
Hawkins?
And the bombing profile is extremely difficult. It's not like a murder where the guy leaves certain fingerprints at the scene. Bombing is a lot more complex. Personal, when you shoot somebody, it's more impersonal when you build a bomb and you put it under his car and turn around and walk away. You don't have to sit there and watch.
He doesn't like to get close to his victims. The agents also suspect something other than money motivates this bomber.
Is this a terrorist act? And what's the goal of this particular act? Is it to just make money? Are these people involved with narcotics and drugs? Do we have organized crime, the mafia? We did not believe that organized crime would try and pull this type of thing. We didn't think the druggers would try and pull this type of thing. They like to remain off the skyline.
Investigators are running out of leads, and the bombers seem poised to strike again. In Reno, 40 miles north, 4 more casinos received bomb threats. In State Line, Nevada, the FBI searches for a dangerous extortionist. He's already blown up one casino, and in his extortion note, he threatened to do it again. The FBI fears the bomber is simply toying with them. In Reno, 40 miles north, 4 more casinos received bomb threats. Investigators search the casinos, but no bombs are found. Further investigation reveals these threats aren't connected to the Harvey's bombing. Agents again appeal to the public for help. They distribute descriptions of the suspects based on the security guards' recollections. Assistant Special Agent in Charge Herb Hawkins.
We were bombarded with thousands upon thousands of phone calls.
In early September, agents receive an intriguing tip. 3 former employees of a jet aircraft plant moved to Reno just before the casino bombing. According to the FBI lab in Washington, some of the electronic components used in the bomb resemble aircraft parts. Aircraft engineers could have the technical savvy to put together a device like this. Special Agent Bill Junkie.
They fit our profile, if you will, of being a group. They had access, they had experience in explosive work. They looked pretty darn good. And we spent a lot of investigative man-hours looking into these people and covering the leads from this group that extended nationwide. We focused on this group with a lot of our resources for 2 to 3 weeks before we were finally able to eliminate them as suspects.
It's one of many dead ends, and the bomber has gone strangely silent. Desperate for leads, investigators review every phone tip they have received since the bombing. Assistant Special Agent in Charge Herb Hawkins wades through thousands of memos. On October 1st, a small tip catches his eye. A motel owner saw a white van leaving her motel in South Lake Tahoe an hour before the bomb was delivered. From witness statements, the FBI knows that the bomb was delivered in a white van. Hawkins thinks it's too close to be a coincidence.
When I picked that memo up, first it came in on the 800 line and no one had looked at it. It's now a month old. And a suspicious vehicle leaving at 4:30 in the morning in a van needs to be covered.
Agents interview the motel owner who called in the tip. On August 26th at 4 a.m., she heard strange noises in the parking lot of the motel.
She awoke and went to a window and saw 2 to 3 individuals in white overalls trying to start a white van. She copied down the license number to ensure that it was the same license number on the registration card.
The next day, she called the FBI hotline. Agents learn the name on the hotel registration card is fake. They run the license plate number of the white van through the California Department of Motor Vehicles.
The information that came back from the DMV check on that license plate was that the vehicle was registered to a Mr. John Burgess, who was a resident of Clovis, California, which is right down by Fresno. Immediately, agents in the Fresno office went to pay a visit to Mr. Burgess and see why that van of his was up at Lake Tahoe and was being occupied by 3 people who appeared to be suspicious.
Burgess tells agents he doesn't know what they're talking about. He owns a white van, but his son usually drives it.
We were unable to gather very much information from Mr. Burgess other than the fact that his son had the vehicle and that his son might be involved in growing marijuana.
Agents interview Burgess's son in Fresno.
You were in Tahoe.
They ask him what he was doing in Tahoe at 4 o'clock in the morning and why he used a fake name on his registration.
The young man told the investigators that he was up at Lake Tahoe looking for a place to grow marijuana. These agents realized that Lake Tahoe is at an elevation of 6,200 feet plus. It is not conducive whatsoever to growing marijuana because of the climatic conditions. So that was a pretty lame excuse.
Agents suspect Burgess's son is lying, but they don't know why. They don't think he's the bomber. At 18, they feel he's too young to construct a bomb this complex. Agents move on, searching for more viable leads.
The investigation into this bombing wore on and on and on. We interviewed well over 400 people, suspects in this bombing, throughout the country.
The bomb caused $3 million in damage. The people behind this must be stopped before they build another bomb. But agents are running out of leads. They have not heard from the bomber in months. By November, all but 16 agents are called home. The investigation is stalling. The FBI tries a new approach.
In the early part of 1981, we decided that we needed to up the ante for the reward. The reward was then increased to $500,000, from $250,000 to $500,000.
If a tight-knit group is responsible for the casino bombing, the FBI is betting that $500,000 in cash should be enough money to tear it apart.
We got our $500,000, and we got the news media, asked them to put this out. We had a small news conference, and it was prolific.
The FBI's gamble pays off.
And it wasn't but a very short time, maybe a few days, that our phone call came in. A young man called the Fresno office of the FBI and told them that we had been close, but we weren't on the right guy. He told us that it was not the young son of Mr. Burgess that we should be looking at, that it was in fact John Burgess Sr. himself who was responsible for this.
The tip makes sense. Although John Burgess didn't appear to be a likely suspect, agents have never resolved why his son was in the Tahoe area when the bomb was delivered. Within days, the entire investigation is moved from State Line, Nevada to Fresno, California.
There was already a resident agency there, but we established another office there, and we brought in another 30, 40 agents to Fresno to begin our focus on John Burgess. I personally believed that this was our guy. There was a family situation involved. He had two sons who could have helped him and would not have participated in the reward. They would have kept their mouths shut like we expected. And I moved down to Fresno with great anticipation. I thought, this is it.
Yes, the FBI suspects John Burgess Sr. is the casino bomber, but they still need evidence linking him to the crime before they can make an arrest. A major casino lies in ruins, decimated by a massive bomb. The FBI suspects that John Burgess, a Fresno landscaping contractor, is the mastermind behind the devastating bomb. Special Agent Bill Jonke.
Our investigation of John Burgess Sr. included everything we can think of. We talked and interviewed his relatives, his friends. We surveilled him day and night. We checked his background. We checked people who had worked for him.
Burgess has an interesting past, according to Special Agent Herb Hawkins.
He was a Hungarian immigrant who had run afoul of the Soviets during the Hungarian Revolution. He went to a slave labor camp, exiled by the Soviets to that area, and had a great amount of work with explosives.
Through interviews, agents learn that Burgess is in financial trouble. In March 1980, the IRS filed suit against him for $34,000 in back taxes. He also owes Harvey's Casino $15,000 in unpaid gambling markers.
His gaming losses that he told us about and that we had verified through records beforehand only led to make him a stronger suspect, because we always felt that whoever did this had a grudge against Harvey's Casino, probably owed him money or had lost money, so it really fit perfectly into our bomber profile.
Agents feel John Burgess has the skill and the motive to bomb Harvey's Casino. Now they need to prove it.
Myself and another agent were assigned to contact Mr. Burgess every single day, 7 days a week. Just pay a visit to him and talk to him, get him to talk. Some days he'd yell and scream at us and wouldn't let us in. Other days he'd let us in and talk to us.
Burgess is very egotistical. He likes to talk about his successful landscaping business and his skill in electronics. The profilers were correct.
Things started to fall into place in terms of background. Now we needed to find out, there in Fresno, did he build the device there, and where did he buy the stuff to do this?
You have a bombing, one of the first things you do is you start looking around for thefts. Where could this stuff have come from? They could make it themselves, they could import it, they could steal it, they could buy it. You go to the ATF and pull all the theft reports.
Agents learned that 1,000 pounds of dynamite was stolen from a construction site near Burgess's home prior to the casino bombing.
So the puzzle started to come together, and it was time that we got people to start talking to us from inside the family.
Agents interview a member of Burgess's extended family who owns a large turkey farm near Fresno. They're particularly interested in the switches on a feeding mechanism Burgess constructed for the farm.
It was identical to the construction of the bomb. It was the same type of plastic material that he used, the same kind of soldering that he used.
Agents turn up the pressure on Burgess's sons and finally persuade them to talk.
Both kids in general told us the same story, that initially their father had asked them to participate in this extortion attempt. Both kids were not anxious to do it. They didn't want to do it, but they had loyalty to their father. And they at times provided some labor.
Burgess's son admits he did not grow marijuana. He made up the story to protect his father. The FBI learns that 2 employees in Burgess's landscaping business were the men who delivered the bomb to Harvey's casino. Burgess's sons say their father's girlfriend helped write the extortion letter. And they lead authorities to the place where their father hid the remainder of the stolen dynamite.
They also provided us with information about an additional explosives theft that occurred at basically the same site. And they told us where this explosive was buried. 600 pounds worth of dynamite was buried in a dry creek bed outside of Fresno. Mr. Burgess had told the boys he planned to build another bomb and put it somewhere else.
On August 16, 1981, John Burgess is arrested as he tries to leave his home. Burgess and his co-conspirators are charged with commercial extortion and conspiracy. Burgess's sons plead guilty to conspiracy and are sentenced to probation. On April 15, 1985, John Burgess is convicted and sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The FBI lost a building, but the operation was a success. No one lost their lives, and the FBI captured the bomber before he could strike again.
So we learned a lot about processing large building bombing. What you have to do first, second, and third, where the pitfalls are, where the dangers are. Now, unfortunately, since then, all around the globe, we've had opportunities to practice the lessons and refine the lessons that we learned there.
Robbery, torture, murder. A drug cartel will do anything to protect their business. no matter who's caught in the crossfire. The FBI and NYPD work together to fight back, risking their own lives by going undercover to unlock the secrets of deadly drug gangs, to bring them down from the inside.
When the streets of New York flooded with crack cocaine in the 1980s, a wave of violence threatened to drown the city. Colombian cartels brought the coke in and ran their operations with an iron fist. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. Agents somehow had to infiltrate a complex crime ring, protected by a code of silence. Going head-to-head with killers, any misstep would be fatal.
Crack cocaine. Cheap, easy to make, and highly addictive. When it hits the streets, violent crime follows. Most of the bloodshed occurs at the street level, among users and dealers. But innocent people suffer too. NYPD detective Richard Eppolito worked narcotics.
There's one gentleman that owned a Chinese restaurant. Came out one night, and there was a couple of individuals involved in drugs, and they'll do anything they can do to get their next fix. Well, this particular gentleman had gold teeth, and they thought nothing of killing him. They just shot him dead, and while he's down on the ground, they pulled out their switchblades and they started prying his teeth out.
In New York, the crack epidemic began in the late 80s. NYPD Lieutenant Mike Garrity.
It was an extremely violent time. You had turf wars. You had people who just controlled a certain corner. If you set up to make a sale on that corner, there'd be a drive-by shooting. We were losing our youth. We were losing innocent bystanders to drive-bys. Every one of the index crimes went up. It was out of control back then.
But arresting users and dealers individually does little to slow the onslaught.
You know, it's never ending. It's just a constant flow. For every one or two guys you take down, there's others to replace them.
The only way to stem the flow of narcotics is to find the organizations that import the drugs and dismantle them. To do this, the Department of Justice creates the Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force. Known as C-13, the task force is made up of NYPD detectives and FBI agents. They know exactly who they're up against, according to Supervisory Special Agent Fernando Llanos.
In New York in the early 90s, the situation was that you had Colombians in control of the drug trade.
The two main drug gangs are Colombia's Medellin and Cali cartels. When the cartels ship drugs into the country, they smuggle them in by packing them among valid cargo, according to U.S. Customs Special Agent Phil Spinelli.
With containerized cargo, you can conceal the narcotics in just about any type of cargo that you ship into the United States. They've liquefied narcotics and tried to put it into bottles. They've disguised it as dominoes. They've put it into cans of guava paste and cans of peaches where the peaches were completely sealed.
And they ship it in through New York City, one of the busiest ports in the world.
In the New York area, we receive approximately 5,000 containers a day. Each of those containers probably have somewhere in the neighborhood of about 18, 20, maybe 30,000 pounds of cargo. So it's extremely difficult. It's like finding a needle in a haystack.
When the drugs hit New York, they are distributed across the country. The task force is determined to shut off this supply of drugs and break the backs of the cartels.
Our purpose in the task force was to build cases, try to monitor these individuals, try to infiltrate them, and take them down.
To do so, Detective Eppolito immerses himself undercover in the shadowy world of drug traffickers, and he needs help.
The most productive cases involve confidential informants because they know what's going on. They're already on the inside.
Once the detective develops trust with an informant, doors begin to open.
I had one particular confidential informant that was extremely reliable.
In December 1991, the informant tells Eppolito about a man named Eduardo. He says Eduardo deals in cloned cell phones and might be connected to the Medellin cartel. He knows the Colombian cartels desperately want to do business with the American mafia.
They felt traditional organized crime was here a long time. They know all the ins and outs, all the tricks. They have all the contacts. And that's basically what they were looking for.
This could be the opportunity Eppolito's been looking for to get inside the cartel. He decides to go undercover, posing as a member of the mafia in an effort to orchestrate a large-scale drug purchase from the cartel. The detective asks the informant to set up a meeting with Eduardo and introduce him as Tony Romano, his undercover identity. The informant goes to Eduardo and tells him about Tony Romano. Eduardo seems interested in a mafia connection and agrees to meet. But he warns the informant, if it's a setup, there'll be hell to pay. Undercover work is among the most dangerous assignments an officer takes up. If he's identified as a cop, he and his informant will likely be killed. Every meeting is scripted, so the undercover knows what to say and what to avoid.
An undercover operation is a carefully orchestrated deal. We just don't send the undercover out there. He doesn't operate in a vacuum. What we do, we have pre-meets before we go out. We have tack plans. We go over things. We try to cover every scenario that possibly could happen. And when we decide to go out, the safety of the undercover is paramount. We have people that are assigned strictly to watch the undercover, provide security for them. You try to control the meet location. You're going to pick a location that you're somewhat familiar with.
C-13 decides to have Eppolito meet Eduardo in a local bar.
We set up outside, we surveilled, them arriving and going in, but we also sent agents and detectives, inside.
The key is never appearing too anxious.
It was best not to jump right into the drugs, because a lot of times when you do that, they raise up on you, and they think you're the cops or the feds, and they back off. So I figured I'd start off small, start off low, and try to do some cellular fraud business with this guy.
Eppolito suggests a deal for cloned cell phones, reprogrammed phones that use an unwitting customer's service for free. He says he needs them for his mob activities.
And I also told him that I don't want to jump right into the drug aspect because I don't know who you are. So let's do this, and if we both come out of it okay, we can move on. So a little bit of psychology there.
Eduardo agrees to clone the phones for a price. After the meet, Eppolito debriefs the task force. By now, intelligence agents have uncovered more details about the drug dealer.
Eduardo was considered like a street dealer or a mule. He wasn't well placed within any organization. He's a guy that would broker deals, try to hook you up with somebody, stuff like that. He definitely wasn't our main focus in this whole investigation. We wanted to use him as a stepping stone to go higher up or go up the ladder.
Claiming he's satisfied with the cloned phone deal, Eppolito takes the case to the next level. He sets up another deal with Eduardo, this time for drugs. The detective has to maintain his mobster image.
You basically have to show credibility. You have to be able to convince the people that you're who you say you are. In doing so, it means you have to walk the walk, talk the talk.
Authorities need to play it cool. They don't want to order too much cocaine right away, which could tip Eduardo off.
In fact, that's a red flag. So what we decided to do was just order a small amount. So 1 kilogram of cocaine is what we ordered from Eduardo.
Eduardo comes through with a single kilo. A good sign he may be connected to a cartel. Undercover officers follow Eduardo after the deal. They need to determine if the man's really connected to a cartel. Someone who can lead them up the chain of command, or just another small-time dealer who cannot help further the investigation.
Nobody knows, first of all, if in fact we really do have a narcotics smuggling organization. There seems to be hints of it, there seems to be smoke, and what we're trying to do is see if in fact there is a fire there.
Investigators spot a man and a woman who might be associated with Eduardo going in and out of a house. Hopefully, authorities can ID the pair later. This sort of meticulous and time-consuming work is required to gather intelligence and build a case against the cartels who operate under a strictly enforced code of silence. The C-13 task force also checks the purity percentage of the cocaine Eduardo sold them.
It was extremely high quality. It was in the high 90s, which was like telling you that you're basically into the source, which is what we needed.
Pure cocaine means no middlemen have cut it down yet. It looks like Eduardo is a good lead into the cartels.
At that point, we realized that we had somebody that could possibly take us to the types of individuals of drug traffickers that the task force was geared to target.
It's the first milestone in what will be a long and dangerous investigation. In 1991, New York's C-13 task force tries to infiltrate a Colombian drug cartel, beginning with a low-level broker named Eduardo. After one successful cocaine buy, Eduardo asks undercover detective Richard Eppolito to meet the drug dealers Eduardo represents.
So he orchestrated a meet with a female individual known as, her street name was Monica. They would never give anybody their real name for fear they would be identified.
As with every meet, backup agents cover Eppolito. They recognize Monica as the woman seen at the house Eduardo entered after the first buy.
When I was introduced to Monica, it just meant stepping up one extra step in a ladder.
Eppolito must constantly maintain the charade, in character as Tony Romano, a member of the Mafia. He explains he has connections in customs and can move shipments through the ports. Agents spot a man watching the meet. They realize he's the other person seen at the house, Special Agent Fernando Llanos.
Colombians, as sophisticated as they were, oftentimes would conduct counter-surveillance. This was, a standard operating procedure for them. So we were wary of individuals that could be looking out to, for law enforcement.
It's a preliminary meeting. No real decisions are made. But Monica appears interested. She wants to meet again to discuss details with her partner, Willie. When she and Eduardo leave, backup tails them to ID Monica's car. Later, in an effort to ID her, the task force has a uniformed officer conduct a routine traffic stop on the car. The driver is the man who watched the meet in the restaurant. The officer gets IDs on the pair. The man is Gustavo Valencia, and Monica's real name is Rocio Londaño. Investigators run the names and discover both are involved with Colombian cartels, the vicious worldwide leaders of the drug trade. With this information, the C-13 task force opens an official federal conspiracy case and brings in U.S. Customs. From the reports, Customs agent Phil Spinelli confirms Valencia's street name is Willie.
Willie had been identified as being at least a distant cousin of Pablo Escobar, who was the head of the major cartel at that time.
Escobar runs the Medellin cartel, the most violent gang in the history of Colombian drug trade. He offers bounties on the heads of Colombian police officers, maintaining power by killing whoever crosses him. Since Willie's related to Escobar, the C-13 investigation takes on new urgency. They might now be able to take the investigation all the way to the Colombian kingpin. Lieutenant Mike Garrity.
Ideally, in any investigation, you take it from point A to point Z. And that's what we were trying to do. We were trying to get from the lowest level to the highest level. And once we met Willie with his connections, we figured we were right on target during the course of this investigation.
While undercover, Eppolito is constantly under the threat of death. He can never slip out of character. Tony Romano, the role he is playing, supposedly knows how the ports work, but Eppolito doesn't. In order to maintain his disguise, customs agents must give the detective a crash course on international transportation.
It was extremely important for Richie to be knowledgeable about the ports. You have to remember, what Richie is posing as, this is a wise guy, a member of a mafia family. He's also purporting to have connections down at the piers, so he can guarantee the safe passage of the narcotics through customs. The only way he can convince Willie and Monica of this is to have enough knowledge of the inner workings of the pier, so when he explains to them how he intends to carry out the caper, it will be believable. It will be true. It will be accurate.
Because the cartels are sophisticated enough to run their own background checks, the task force creates a full identity for the fictitious Tony Romano, complete with a long criminal record. Everyone working the case knows how important it is to hide Eppolito's true identity. They recall that in February 1985, decorated DEA Special Agent Enrique Camarena was ID'd as law enforcement by the Mexican drug gang he infiltrated. Gang members kidnapped him, tortured him, then stabbed him to death. The C-13 task force wires Eppolito to get incriminating conversations on tape. They are all aware that if Eppolito is discovered, it could be a death sentence. In previous meetings, no one has patted him down. But that could change.
In this type of work, it's very easy to explain them finding a gun on you. I mean, that's part of doing business. You're going to have a gun on you. But it's extremely difficult to try to explain that little wire sticking up tape to your chest.
Above all, Eppolito has to become his character fully to reduce suspicion.
And I had to dress like the wise guys. I had to talk like the wise guys. I had to have a flashy car. I had to have the jewelry.
Soon Eppolito meets Willie. As he moves up the organization ladder, the criminals become more savvy. It gets tougher to fool them.
We're talking about people doing a substantial period of time in jail if caught. Therefore, everybody has a sixth sense. Their very existence depends on whether or not they have a sixth sense or an antenna that goes up. And they're there to question Richie. They're there to make some determination. Is he somebody who is reliable, dependable, and can they do business with him?
There they are.
The task force listens in and covers Eppolito.
And they're basically your buddies, too. They don't want to see you get hurt. So it's a good feeling knowing that there are guys there to back you up.
The task force slowly makes its way toward the heart of the cartel, knowing that at any moment, a single mistake could be deadly. Undercover detective Richard Eppolito, posing as a mafioso named Tony Romano, meets with Colombian drug cartel members. He's backed up by other members of the C-13 task force, some of whom act as mafia bodyguards. Eppolito tells suspects Monica and Willie that if they can get the cocaine to the New York docks, he can move it past customs into his secure warehouse for distribution.
I knew you would get into something.
Customs agent Phil Spinelli.
That was very appealing to the Colombians because they need somebody to pick up these containers full of narcotics at the piers.
After the meeting, undercover agents follow the suspects. They note an interesting aspect of Colombian drug traffickers, according to Supervisory Special Agent Fernando Llanos.
They took a low-key approach. Colombians did not drive around in Mercedes-Benzes and Porsches and flashy, expensive vehicles. They didn't dress particularly in an expensive way. They didn't particularly wear expensive jewelry, a lot of gold and so forth. They made every effort to remain low-key, and we saw that with Monica and Willie.
From additional sources, investigators developed more intelligence on the couple.
It was believed that they had loads in the past entrusted to them that had been lost. And therefore they lost favor, they lost money, and they were obligated to the cartels.
When Willie and Monica lost the drugs, the cartels made one thing very clear. Make good on the debt or die. That pressure should help move the task force's case forward.
Of course, the people that are indebted to the cartel are looking to get out of debt with the cartel and are willing to take more chances to hopefully make a bigger score to be able to get even.
Through Monica and Willie, investigators expand the investigation and pierce the cartel's secret world, according to Detective Eppolito.
One of the goals was to establish enough probable cause to get court-ordered wiretaps to further enhance the case, gather intelligence, basically know what the bad guy's going to do before they actually do it.
Because the couple discussed drug trafficking with Eppolito, investigators have no trouble getting warrants to tap their phones. The task force uses the taps to determine if the cartel believes Eppolito is who he says he is.
They felt free talking on the phones. They would discuss a lot of their arrangements, what they had in mind, what they wanted to do, the big mafioso that they met.
On tape, Monica and Willie tell their cartel contacts that Tony Romano is a safe bet.
We could listen to their calls they were making to Colombia, discussing the meeting they just had with him, and we were able to gather insight that you would not be able to gather otherwise into what their thinking was.
The cartel has taken the bait and is ready for the next step. They send another higher associate to meet with the mafioso.
There's also a female that came into the picture named Magola. She was very attractive Colombian national. She was the niece of a notorious drug dealer out there who they used to refer to as Ivan the Terrible. He was responsible for the deaths of approximately 19 national police officers.
The task force knows Ivan the Terrible specializes in killing cops. Usually in a torture chamber he had built at his compound in Bogota, Colombia. Eppolito must continue playing his role and needs to convince Magola that he's a mafia wise guy or risk being killed. And he's the perfect cop to do it.
He grew up with some, quote, mob people. He knew how they acted. He had the looks. He knew the way to act. He knew the way to dress. And you give Richie a little bit of leeway. You give him a script and he could play the role to a T, and he was absolutely excellent in playing his role.
Eppolito notices one of Magola's associates has a gun and must decide whether to call for help from backup. He takes the risk and stays in character. He doesn't want to blow the case. Backup knows what to do if anyone gets suspicious of them.
Is that possibly somebody is making us? What we would do is probably step a little bit further back from the set. So they would think that to a certain extent they are seeing ghosts, where in fact there were no ghosts.
In the end, it appears Magola believes Tony Romano can provide a safe route for drug running. Slowly, the task force makes its way deeper into the cartel.
We were piecemealed individuals. First we met Eduardo, then we met Monica, then we met Willie, then it was Margolis. They kept introducing different people. The way it works, those people would report back to the people back in Colombia, and they'd say what's going on.
It seems to be going well. But Eppolito can never let down his guard. He is in constant danger. If the cartel suspects anything, they could send assassins and hit Eppolito at any time, not just at a meeting.
They could wait, get you at a later time, let you think everything's okay. Next time you show up, you get one in the back of the head. I feel very uppity, very alert. It's just natural adrenaline, I guess, that kicks in. There's a bit of excitement involved. It's challenging. It's dangerous.
Any mistake could mean another murder of a dedicated law enforcement officer. New York investigators try to infiltrate Pablo Escobar's Medellin drug cartel and dismantle it. As the case builds, the C-13 task force puts more resources into it, including an office for undercover detective Richard Eppolito's mafia character.
We also had an undercover office in Floral Park, Queens. And it was wired for both video and audio to document meets and gather evidence.
It's the best place for monitored meetings, according to Lieutenant Mike Garrity.
We were able to bring the people there. We were able to record the conversations. We were able to videotape every one of these conversations.
When Monica and Willie show up to the office for a meeting, they're watched the entire time. FBI Special Agent Mary Setzer acts as Eppolito's receptionist.
We met in the office approximately 2 or 3 times a month. My responsibilities were to answer the door when the subjects arrived, announce them to the undercover, and then usher them into the office.
She's there for protection, but she's also part of the act.
Richie frequently tried to ease the tension by making fake phone calls to me from the office during his meetings. He would pick up the telephone and say, "Make sure that order arrives tomorrow. Get that fax out."
It's all done to convince the cartel members the detective is actually Tony Romano.
You have to establish credibility with these people. If you say who you are somebody, you have to show them, you have to prove it. So we set up this operation to bring them there and put them at ease. Plus it served as a meeting place. It was out of the view of the public. They felt secure, they felt safe.
It's a slow process as the task force orchestrates a complex fraud against wary adversaries. Supervisory Special Agent Fernando Llanos.
These were savvy people. These were people that were involved in drug trafficking for many years in Colombia and elsewhere outside of Colombia, in furtherance of the cartel's major worldwide distribution effort. Throughout the whole investigation, we were always concerned that, there would be a slip-up, that something inappropriate would be said, or perhaps that surveillances would be made that would give the whole thing up.
If the cartel ever suspects anything, they would likely kill Eppolito and his informant. On rare days off, Eppolito needs a reason he can't meet Monica and Willie. He tells them he often goes to Atlantic City to tend to the mafia business there. Eventually, Monica and Willie ask to see the Atlantic City operation. Eppolito's got a problem. He has no real business in Atlantic City. The team scrambles to create an elaborate ruse that will trick the drug dealers.
Took them all to Atlantic City. That's another credibility thing. They wanted to see where I spent my weekends, where I hung out. So we took them to the casinos. The Jersey State Police were very instrumental on setting up the casinos where I could, walk in like I was a big shot. We could comp them. We got them rooms. You know, we dined like kings and queens.
Backup is all around. The entire undercover operation is carefully scripted, and nothing is left to chance. The task force wants the cartels to see everything they need to see to believe Ippolito is a mafioso. They even send in an undercover officer to act as a mafia captain and ask the informant for a meeting with Ippolito.
The informant talked to Richie. Richie walked away, but in clear view of the other participants. The other individual is prearranged, threw his arms around Richie, greeted him, kissed him on both cheeks, and he handed him an envelope with a wad of money. And Richie sent him on his way, walked back to the table, pulled out the wad of money in the envelope, leaped through it, put his back, and Richie complained that he's always working. Even in Atlantic City, he can't catch a break. And these people were totally impressed with this.
But the cartel needs more convincing. They send an interrogator to meet with Ippolito. His street name is Sammy, and he specializes in finding undercover cops.
Sammy was somebody, he was a wild card that was introduced to the investigation. He was, you know, an enforcer, somebody that apparently, you know, was capable of, you know, determining whether somebody was, you know, a law enforcement officer, obviously.
The room is fully wired, and agents watch from an office in the hotel. In touch with backup stationed near the room. They must protect Ippolito, but they can't move too soon.
You have to make a decision basically in a split second. And if you make the wrong decision in a case like this, let's say to move in, you could blow maybe about a year's worth of investigation. Now, if you move too slow, you could lose an undercover.
Sammy starts the interrogation.
I didn't pat him at the door to see if he was armed or not, but you know, a lot of these guys are armed and you gotta be careful. And you know, I had to make sure I came up with the right answers because if we had any inclination that I was either a bad guy looking to rip him off or law enforcement, I mean, God knows what might have happened.
Ippolito knows backup is there, but it's still a tense situation.
There's always a signal that's set up between you and the backups in case something goes wrong, or a code word. And, you know, you let loose with the signal or the code word, they just take the whole thing down.
Several times, Sammy hints that he thinks Ippolito's trying to trick them.
We were extremely close there. We could have got in there in a couple of seconds, but those couple of seconds could have meant life or death. So it is a gut-wrenching situation.
As Sammy continues to press Ippolito, agents fear that one wrong answer could destroy the entire investigation, and Detective Ippolito would be killed. Undercover Detective Richard Ippolito faces off against an interrogator from Pablo Escobar's drug cartel, a man known only as Sammy. He demands details of Ippolito's past crimes to prove he really is a mafioso.
People have you killed.
Agents watch the meet, ready to send in backup.
At some point during the interrogation process, I felt I had to put a stop to it before either I said something that I couldn't back or the informant. And I basically stood up. I told him, I says, listen, I says, do you really expect me to tell you everything I've done? Do you expect me to tell you the people I've killed, the people I've dealt drugs with? I says, for all I know, you could be a cop, you could be an agent. I says, I told you what I'm going to tell you.
The detective takes a risk, in character as Tony Romano, demanding more respect.
I says, here's my hand. Either you feel comfortable with me, or it's a pleasure meeting you, and I'll take my business elsewhere.
The tension rises.
And he got all upset. He walked off to the side, talking to them. There was some hollering and screaming in Spanish, of course, which I didn't understand.
Sammy and the others might be planning something violent, But Ippolito can't back down now.
You can't show that you're intimidated or afraid of them. I mean, that's the worst thing. You got to come on just as strong or even stronger than they do at times.
Detective Mike Garrity is seconds away, but seconds might be too late.
We were getting ready to move in, but Richie handled it excellent. He was able to get out of it.
Watch post number 1, all units stand down, everything's okay.
Finally, Sammy decides Ippolito is the real thing.
He came back, smiled, shook my hand, and said, "We'll be doing business."
Once again, the detective has conned the criminals. Customs agent Phil Spinelli.
It's all part of being an undercover. It's all part of being able to act calmly under pressure. And Richie, of course, being the pro he is, handled it very well.
Before the drug traffickers leave Atlantic City, Sammy decides to test the informant, according to Supervisory Special Agent Fernando Llanos.
All of the subjects asked the source to go to one of their rooms to talk to him. And fortunately, we had an adjacent room, and we're able to listen in to the conversation.
The informant is a civilian, not law enforcement, and might not hold up to the pressure of the interrogation. Agents watch as Sammy tries to get the informant to double-cross Tony Romano. He pushes hard.
Got a little heated at times. The backup teams thought they were going to have to go crashing through the door and rescue the informant and just basically take the case down at that point.
It's a big case, but not worth a man's life.
You have to take calculated risks, and this was another instance where we needed to do that. Can we respond quickly enough? Can we get into the room if this man whips out a gun, or a knife and puts it to our source's throat?
The informant refuses to betray the powerful mafioso.
He says, his people will kill me. Quicker than that. He says, I could never do anything to betray him or the family. And when he said that, they respected him. And they saw he wasn't going to betray me, so I guess they felt he had a certain amount of integrity. And he wouldn't be that much of a risk factor for them as well. And they broke open a bottle of champagne in the room, and they celebrated. And
another possible crisis averted.
It could have been the end of the investigation, or the end of the informant if they had decided to kill him.
It seems like endless meetings, but this level of caution is how the cartels grew so powerful.
You're dealing with formidable adversaries. I mean, there was a lot of negotiations before we got down to the fine movements of getting the drugs from Colombia over to here.
As the investigation deepens, the next step up the ladder is Hernando Sanchez-Eneo, a high-level cartel member. He suggests going beyond a single shipment and opening a new drug pipeline into the U.S., a marriage of the Colombian cartels and the American mafia.
We gave them the opportunity to move a product without law enforcement interceding from the pier to one of our warehouses. So in effect, what we did, we provided one-stop shopping for this organization, and they loved it.
The addition of Hernando means the C-13 task force is moving deeper into Escobar's cartel.
It was a feather in our cap to get him involved in this particular thing, and more we knew we were getting closer and closer to the source.
With a warrant, investigators tap Hernando's phones. To protect Ippolito, they route calls through a secure Atlantic City phone number to his New York home. During one call, Hernando asks Ippolito to come to Colombia with him to inspect a cocaine shipment. It's too dangerous for Ippolito to go. It would be like walking into the lion's den. And the task force would be unable to protect him. But if he backs out, the cartel may grow suspicious and kill him. Undercover Detective Richard Ippolito is working to bring down the powerful Medellin drug cartel. Hernando Sanchez Aneo wants him to accompany him to Colombia to inspect a cocaine shipment. The detective must get out of the trip. It's too dangerous. His team could not protect him on foreign soil. Thinking quickly, he tells Hernando he can't leave his mob business unattended and hopes he doesn't suspect anything.
I mean, one of two things could happen. They could just walk away from you and never have anything to do with you again. Or depending on how far you are into their group or organization, how much you do know, your life could be at risk.
Eppolito gets a break. Hernando falls for the story. The task force continues to follow the suspects to ID more associates. Investigators watch as Hernando meets with a man identified as Mauro Trujillo, a high-level cartel member who's been wanted by the DEA for narcotics trafficking and money laundering. Agents want to grab him, but they don't want to blow the current investigation, so they wait. As Eppolito gets deeper into the deadly cartel, the danger increases.
There's a high risk factor. Some nights I didn't go home. If I did go home, I would have to do it in such a way where I made sure I wasn't being followed.
Finally, as the new year passes, Eppolito learns the shipment is on its way. But there's a change of plans. Instead of the cocaine, Hernando says they're sending a test load. 9.5 tons of marijuana. In character as Tony Romano, the detective acts upset at the change. But it's a big load, and would be the evidence they need to bring the operation to a close.
It was a heck of a test load. Normally, we hadn't seen anything like that. Test loads were like 1 or 2 kilos. See if it gets seized, goes onto the street, and let's see what happens.
The task force can't let that amount of drugs on the street. When the load arrives at the New York docks, undercover investigators transport it directly to Eppolito's warehouse. The investigators need to check the container's contents. But there's a seal on its door to ensure no one has opened it. It's a common practice in international shipping. Agents need to find a way to get inside and keep the seal intact. U.S. Customs Agent Phil Spinelli.
What they were able to do is to detach the door without breaking the seal.
At first, it looks like a normal shipment of clothing. Stashed behind the shirts, marijuana. Literally tons of it.
We recovered somewhere in the neighborhood of about 272 cartons or crates containing 19,000 pounds of marijuana valued in excess of $22 million.
They're definitely dealing with a major cartel.
It's not easy to put together 9.5 tons of marijuana. These people had the resources to do all this. These were bad guys, major violators. They, they plagued this country with this stuff, and they just needed to be taken down and bring a halt to their operation.
For prosecution, the C-13 task force needs the suspects to complete the transaction and accept the shipment. Eppolito invites them to the warehouse.
And of course, there was video and surveillance equipment in place. We had one of my workers come with a big bolt cutter and cut the seal on the back of the container. And I handed them the seal. I said, "Here's a souvenir for you." And they could see that the load was sealed. It wasn't tampered with. It got here in one piece. And I happened to have an Italian switchblade on me, by the way. I cut it open, and they examined it, and they were happy. They saw it was the stuff they had sent over, and they also wanted to take some back with them.
But Eppolito can't let the drugs hit the street, and uses the cartel's unplanned switch from cocaine to marijuana to his advantage.
I said, now you screwed me, and, this is basically how it's going to go. You're going to do what I tell you to do. I want those 5,000 kilos here. When I get my drugs, then you get your marijuana.
The suspects panic. They are desperate to take control of the drugs. Shockingly desperate.
Monica actually offered up her baby to me as a form of collateral and good trust.
It's a stunning move no one expects.
Fear comes across when you hear stories like that. And the reason being is that if she's willing, they give her child up to this unknown criminal figure. What would she have done to myself or any member of the investigative team if in fact she found out we were law enforcement, or if in fact she found out that Richie in reality was an undercover police detective? It sends a couple of chills up your spine.
Eppolito stands firm. He will not release the marijuana until the cocaine he ordered comes through. The cartel members finally agree and plan to meet later. While C-13 plans arrests, Eppolito faces increased pressure from angry cartel members.
No, I can't do that. It got pretty heated during these latter meetings because they kept pressuring him to release the drugs, to release some of the marijuana so they could then sell it.
On February 3rd, 1993, more than a year after the investigation began, the arrest plans are finalized. The task force moves in. They start with Willie and Monica at Eppolito's office. By this time, the pair suspects nothing.
FBI, get your hands up! Get your hands up!
They were bewildered. They didn't know what was going on. Guys coming with shotguns, guns out, bulletproof vests on.
Then, the man they knew as Tony Romano emerges.
I went out there to speak to them and try to get them to cooperate. And I told them, I said, you know who I am? I'm the police. And I guess they felt betrayed and that I had deceived them, which I did, in the interest of justice. And Willie actually looked at me with tears in his eyes and he says, how could you do this to me? I said, well, Willie, I says, you come into this country, you bring this stuff, you destroy our people, our youth. I said, I'm a police officer, I'm a detective. I says, I'm here to uphold the law. I says, you broke the law. I said, you people are under arrest. And that was it, and I walked out of the room.
FBI agents, FBI agents!
Within 24 hours, C-13 arrests Hernando and 6 other co-conspirators. Magola is never found, having fled to Colombia. Eduardo, Monica, Willie, Hernando, Trujillo, and others are each charged with multiple counts of conspiracy to distribute narcotics. FBI Special Agent Mary Setzer.
They all pled guilty. However, Mauro Trujillo, also known as Restrepo, fled the country and left for Colombia. The FBI is looking for information regarding the whereabouts of Mr. Trujillo. If anybody has that information, they can call the New York office of the FBI at 212-384-1000.
More than a year of dangerous undercover work by the agents and officers of the C-13 task force helped cripple a drug cartel many thought was unstoppable.